They sat beside you when the world turned cold. They asked how you were, offered their shoulder, and gave you words that sounded like compassion, but behind those words was silence, the kind of silence that hides sharp edges. You didn't see it then, you were too grateful, too trusting. They wore empathy like a costume, rehearsed concern like a performance, and while you confided, they calculated. While you healed, they watched. Not to protect you, but to study how much it would take to break you. There's a certain cruelty in fake kindness. It doesn't just hurt. It delays the pain until you're too deep to escape. And by the time you realize it wasn't care, it was camouflage, you've already bled enough to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. The smile that watched you bleed, they smiled when you succeeded. They clapped, they nodded, they whispered praise just loud enough for you to hear. But it wasn't joy, it was study. You thought they were proud, didn't you? You thought that behind those kind words was warmth, that the glint in their eye was admiration. But no, that glint was measurement. That smile was reconnaissance. They were noting your pace, your rhythm, your blind spots, not to walk beside you, but to wait for the moment you'd stumble. They didn't sharpen the knife. They didn't have to. They just stood by and watched you bleed from wounds life gave you, and pretended they didn't enjoy the sight. And still you trusted them, because who would think that cruelty could dress up as concern? Who would think that betrayal could wear a gentle face? You see, some people don't fight you head on. They don't confront, don't argue, don't resist. No, they sit beside you in silence and pretend to understand. They offer you encouragement like medicine laced with delay. They know your strengths, but more importantly, they know your fears, because you told them, because you let them in, because you believed that their presence in the dark corners of your life was a sign of loyalty. But no, they weren't sitting there to comfort you. They were there to observe, and the moment you blinked, the moment you sighed too deeply, the moment you exposed your ache, they stored it, quietly, like keeping notes for a test they knew you didn't know you were taking. They didn't want to destroy you in public. That's too obvious, too loud. No, they wanted your collapse to be subtle, private, untraceable. They wanted to say, I don't know what happened to them, while secretly rejoicing that they did. You trusted the hand that patted your back, never realizing it was checking for the softest place to place the weight of doubt, and you still wonder how you missed it. But how could you have known? When you've known pain, any gesture of care feels like a miracle, and that's what makes this kind of betrayal so vicious. It doesn't attack your ego. It attacks your hope, and hope is a sacred thing. But here's the truth. The smile that watched you bleed was never your enemy. It was your teacher. Because now, you see more clearly, you listen beyond words, you feel the energy behind every hand that reaches out. And while they smiled thinking you'd never recover, they never knew they were sharpening you. Pain like this doesn't destroy, it reveals. It separates the loud from the real. It teaches you that not all kindness is clean, not all love is light, and not every hand that reaches out is trying to lift you. Some are only checking how far you've fallen, but you rose anyway, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself that no one who smiled at your pain gets to define your future. The art of disguised intentions, they didn't lie with words. They lied with presence. They stayed close, offered comfort, lent you an ear, not to help but to hear, not to understand but to collect. There's a quiet, terrifying brilliance in how some people wear goodness like a second skin. They've mastered the craft of appearing harmless, of playing the role of the concerned friend, the loyal confidant, the caring soul. But behind every nod was calculation, behind every gentle phrase was strategy. They knew exactly what to say, when to say it, and how to say it just enough to keep you open, unguarded. It wasn't affection, it was architecture, and every moment of closeness was a carefully placed brick in the foundation of your undoing. They asked about your dreams not because they believed in them, but because they needed to know how high you planned to fly, so they could estimate the height of your fall. They watched you build, encouraged you to take risks, celebrated your small wins, while quietly preparing for the day they would benefit from your collapse. These are not enemies in the traditional sense. No, they don't throw punches, they don't raise their voice, they play the long game, they sabotage by suggestion. Are you sure you can handle all this? You've been working too hard, maybe slow down. What if it doesn't work? And they smile while they say it, making it sound like concern. But it's not concern, it's erosion. Little by little they wear down your edge, soften your certainty, blur your focus. And all the while you think they're on your side. This is the art of disguised intentions. It's not about attacking you directly. It's about aligning themselves so closely with you that you don't notice when they start to guide you off the path. They whisper doubts, but never loud enough to raise alarms. They offer suggestions, but never firm enough to be called interference. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start losing your fire, not because you're weak, but because you've surrounded yourself with people who feed off the dimming of your light. And when things begin to fall apart, they'll be the first to say, "I tried to warn you," with a sigh of false sorrow, all while hiding the satisfaction in their eyes. But the truth always rises. Intent can only hide behind charm for so long. Eventually the mask slips. It always does. And when it does, it's not just their betrayal that stings. It's your own blindness. But don't blame yourself. The kindest hearts are often the easiest to deceive. That's the cost of seeing the good in others. You forget they might be performing, but you learn. You become quiet, watchful. You don't stop trusting. You just learn to trust with your eyes open. And when you look back, you'll realize they didn't break you. They revealed you. You survived the illusion, and that is the beginning of a different kind of strength. The fall they waited for, they didn't push you. They didn't trip you. They didn't raise a hand or throw a stone. No, what they did was colder. They waited quietly, patiently. Like shadows in the corner of the room, they stood by while life wore you down, and they watched, not with concern, but with anticipation. You thought they were in your corner, the kind of people who would catch you if you slipped. But they never reached out, not because they couldn't, but because they didn't want to. Your fall was not an accident to them. It was a scene they were waiting for. They didn't create the storm, but they hoped you'd drown in it. They didn't start the fire, but they made sure there was enough silence around you that the flames could grow. That's the thing about these people. They don't act openly. They don't show their intentions. They let gravity do the work, and cheer silently when you begin to drop. And when it began, when cracks formed in your confidence, when the weight of the world started bending your spine, they didn't offer a hand. They offered observations, dressed up as sympathy. You've seemed off lately. Maybe you're just not yourself anymore. I hope you're okay. But behind those words was the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd been hoping this day would come. Because your strength made them feel small. Your growth reminded them of their own stagnation. And your light, no matter how gentle, cast too strong a shadow on their ego. They couldn't grow beside you, so they waited for the moment life would shrink you down to a size they could handle. And when it happened, when your voice dimmed, when your energy waned, when you began questioning your own worth, they didn't feel sorrow. They felt relief. You see, some people are not just threatened by your success. They're exhausted by it. They're tired of pretending to applaud what secretly intimidates them. And when the universe gave them the chance to see you stumble, they didn't interfere. They just watched. That's the cruelty of it. It wasn't a knife in the back. It wasn't betrayal with noise and drama. It was silence, passive, careful silence, and somehow that hurts more, because it makes you question everything. Your judgment, your memories, your instincts. How could someone who claimed to care stand so still while you suffered? But here's the truth. Your fall wasn't the end, it was the filter. The ones who watched and waited revealed themselves, not through action but through inaction, and now you see it. Now you understand. Real loyalty doesn't wait for permission to help. Real care doesn't hesitate, and from that moment forward you began rising differently, quieter, smarter, with fewer people around you. Because once you've seen who waits for your fall, you never forget it, you never unsee it, and the strength that comes after that, it's not built for applause, it's built for survival. The moment you saw it, there's always a moment, quiet, piercing, when the truth arrives. It doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it just stands there still and cold, like someone you've met before but never really seen. You look into their eyes and suddenly, you know. You know they were never clapping for you. They were clapping for the performance you gave when you didn't see their envy. You know now that their silence wasn't peace, it was quiet resistance. You recall the long pauses in conversations, the strange shifts in their tone when you spoke of your dreams, the way they seemed more engaged when you were broken than when you were hopeful, and it clicks. It all clicks, that moment, when the truth finally steps into the light, changes everything. It doesn't come with anger, no, it comes with stillness. You sit in the same room, but everything feels different. You replay conversations like old recordings, and now you hear what was really being said between the lines. You see how their comfort always came with conditions, how their presence was strongest when you were at your weakest, how their encouragement faded the moment you stood tall. It's not that they were obvious, they weren't. That's what makes it so haunting. It was all so subtle, so surgical. The compliments always just soft enough to avoid suspicion, the support always just short enough to keep you dependent, the concern always just a little too rehearsed, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's not betrayal in the traditional sense. It's betrayal by erosion. They didn't cross a line. They erased it slowly, and now the moment has come. The fog has lifted, and it hurts. Not because you lost them, but because you realize they were never really with you. They just stayed close enough to feel like safety, long enough to keep you from noticing how cold their loyalty really was. And in that moment, you realize something else. You were never asking too much. You were just asking the wrong people, but here's the turning point. Clarity isn't pain, it's freedom. It's not weakness to realize you were deceived. It's strength to admit it, to see it, and to move forward without bitterness. That moment, the moment you saw it, wasn't your breaking, it was your awakening. The beginning of a new era where your energy is guarded, your circle is smaller, and your heart no longer opens just because someone knocks. You become deliberate, you become watchful, not cold but cautious. And while they may still pretend, still smile, still ask how you're doing, you won't fall for it again, because you've seen what lies beneath the surface. And that vision, that painful, clear, undeniable vision will guide you now, not with rage, not with revenge, but with quiet distance, and in that distance you'll find peace, because sometimes the most powerful thing you can ever say is nothing at all, just a knowing smile, and the choice not to let them close again. Rise without apology. You don't need to explain yourself any more. Not to them, not to those who smiled while you suffered, not to those who asked questions not out of care, but out of curiosity, hoping your downfall would confirm their silent judgments. No, you owe them nothing, not your words, not your energy, not your rage. What you owe is your absence, your growth, your quiet, unapologetic rise. Let them wonder how you healed. Let them sit with the echo of your silence while you rebuild in places they will never be invited. Because the greatest response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's resurrection. It's standing tall without the need to announce your comeback. It's moving forward without a backward glance. There is strength in walking away with dignity. Not slamming doors, not broadcasting your pain, but simply stepping into a life where their presence is no longer required. You see, people who plotted your fall while pretending to hold your hand, they expect you to break. They count on your anger, your outrage, your need for closure, but what disarms them, what confuses them, is your calm, your refusal to beg for answers, your decision to live without needing them to validate your worth. That's how you win, not by proving them wrong, but by no longer caring whether they were ever right. You rise without apology, without guilt, without shrinking yourself to make others comfortable, without softening your shine to protect their insecurity. You rise with intention, with boundaries, with the understanding that healing doesn't require an audience, and peace isn't something you ask permission to have. The same people who underestimated your resilience will now watch from a distance, confused by the fact that what was meant to break you built you instead, and you won't need to say a word. Your growth will speak for you. Your silence will say everything, and yes, there will be moments when the past whispers, when the memory of betrayal resurfaces, but you'll look around and see how far you've come, how you've rebuilt from ruins without bitterness, how you've found purpose not in pain, but in perseverance. And you'll smile, not out of arrogance, but out of recognition, because you now understand something profound. Your value was never dependent on their approval, your future was never in their hands, and your strength was forged not in applause, but in solitude. So rise quietly, powerfully, unapologetically. Let them sit in the discomfort of your peace. Let them realize too late that their betrayal was not the end of your story. It was the turning of the page. You've outgrown their games, their masks, their subtle poisons, and now, without bitterness, without vengeance, without a word, you walk forward, and that walk, steady and unshaken, becomes the very thing they never expected, your freedom,